Hey everybody, Ben Johnston here, Matt the Lawyer with another COVID-19 legal update. I was cruising through the analytics on my YouTube page and I noticed that the most popular video right now on that page is an older video that I did about force majeure clauses. Back then I was doing a conversation, it was largely very nerdy, very contract geek lawyer focused. And if you're interested in that, there's going to be a link at the end of this video somewhere up here that will tell you where you can go and watch that video. This particular video is going to be focusing on the current situation that we are facing. So to briefly sum up, a force majeure clause is a clause that appears in most contracts that deals with the ability for one or both parties or all parties to a contract to be excused from performance of the contract for things that are happening outside of the control of the parties to the contract. So the most common of these events outside the control of the parties is what are referred to as acts of God. Fire, flood, tornado, hurricane, earthquakes, things like that, a natural disaster of some sort. Famously, there is in the terms of service for Apple a zombie apocalypse phrase, but I don't want to digress too far there. Anyway, force majeure clauses also often contain a provision dealing with government action. So I thought I would take a look at some of the common events that are starting to crop up that are somewhat beyond the control of the individual parties and that may be impacting a force majeure clause and may be able to excuse or at least modify the performance of the parties to the contract that has the force majeure clause. So one common thing that is starting to happen in this world of social distancing is that workforces are being dispersed. People are working from home. If that is the case and it's impacting you as a business's ability to perform a contract, you should be having a conversation with your client. Normally a force majeure clause is about impossibility. Sometimes it can be about impracticability, but that's not often written in there. Usually force majeure clauses are very formulaic and don't really cover cases that deal with improbability or difficulty of completing a contract, only with impossibility. So a dispersed workforce is probably not going to get you out of performing your contract, but you may and should have conversations with your customers to make sure that you may need to modify timelines, you may need to modify workflows and things of that nature to accommodate both the client needs and your own workforce needs. The second situation is one that I think is going to start cropping up a little bit more as we move forward with the current emergencies, and that is layoffs due to economic conditions. So if you find yourself in a position where you're going to have to lay off your staff, lay off most of your workers, and it's going to impact your ability to deliver on a contract, just like with the dispersed workforce situation, you may have to have a conversation with your clients. Now, this is getting a little bit easier to sort of substantiate. If you're unable to stay open as a business, you're going to be unable to perform a contract as well. If you can't pay your workers to deliver, it's going to be hard to deliver on a contract. In theory, this does render the performance impossible, but it's probably going to be a bit of a gray area. In the short term, you'll probably be able to manage that with your customers or clients. In the long term, it's not going to be easy, and you may be faced with a situation of having to perform a contract that is going to not be easy to do. And you may have to bring back on workers on a short period of basis to get something done. This is one where you're going to have to, again, negotiate with your clients and customers, make sure that they understand what's going on, make sure the circumstances that you're facing, and see if you can be creative about delivering on the contract, if at all possible. The third situation that is cropping up is actually covered by most force majeure clauses, and that is government action. Now, I got to sort of explain, not every state is like the state of Maryland. Not every state has ordered certain businesses to be closed. Not every state has ordered certain activities to not take place. Here in the state of Maryland, Governor Hogan has banned all public gatherings and private gatherings with more than 50 people. Governor Hogan has closed bars, restaurants, gyms, movie theaters, live performance theaters, concerts, you name it. All of those have been closed, except for you can get takeout or delivery of your food if you'd like. So those situations are government mandated and you can't get out of them. So those events certainly fall into the government prescription. The government has ordered certain activities to not take place, and at least in the state of Maryland, failure to follow that order is a crime, punishable by up to $5,000 or a year in jail, or both. So conducting those activities is done so at the risk of a civil penalty, making performance legally impossible, as well as perhaps practical as and certainly a matter of public health. But another question has come up, and that question is dealing with other areas of the country that have not banned certain activities, but are certainly recommending certain things. So, for example, another state has recommended that large gatherings not take place, but has not enacted an executive order or passed legislation banning those activities. So that leads to the question of, does it render performance impossible? Technically, no. It does not render performance of that particular contract impossible. It may make it impractical. It may make it unsafe, but it's not impossible. If you're in a situation where it is a government recommendation, again, speak to the other party to the contract, see if you can come to an accommodation. If it has been outright banned or prohibited, that is clearly within the scope of the force majeure clause, and it should be invoked. Be sure you follow the procedures for invoking the force majeure clause. Usually there is some sort of notice requirement. You've got to send them a letter, an email, something like that. If that's the case, then you engage at that point. So those are the situations that are starting to crop up and I'm starting to see. Force majeure clauses are covered by government edicts, government regulations that say you can't do certain things. And in an emergency situation like we are facing now, that is something that you're going to have to follow through with. But in all circumstances, make sure you follow the notice provisions and talk to your clients or customers, talk to the other parties to the contract. Make sure that you have some sort of idea of what you're going to do going forward, how you're going to manage it, what accommodations can be made, things of that nature. If you straight up invoke a force majeure clause without a conversation, expect some sort of legal action. It may not happen now, it may happen somewhere down the line, but you could probably expect it. Force majeure clauses are designed to excuse performance. They are not designed to excuse communication. So have those communications as difficult as they may be. In the meantime, keep your head up, keep a positive attitude, be safe out there, wash your hands, practice a little social distancing, and I'll talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.